Hello and welcome to Ask the Expert. My name is Christopher and I'm your host. Today we've been fortunate enough to have Claus with us. And Claus, you're a bit of a vinyl buff. Can you talk a little bit about it?
Well, Christopher, pleasure to be here. My job at Dynaudio is Chief Commercial Officer, so I have the overall commercial responsibility for our global markets in all the segments that we operate in. I've been a music buff since birth, and I've been a hi-fi enthusiast probably since I was 13, I believe.
So that's a lot of years.
That's a long time.
Yeah.
I've always been in this industry now for a very long time, and I'm here by choice. I love what we do here, and I love the industry in general. And my passion for vinyl has been going on for more years than I would care to mention here. Yes,
but that's good because that's what we're going to talk about today. So should we just jump into the questions?
Absolutely, let's do it.
Claus, our first question is from Tim Werner, and Tim has been noticing that on a lot of records it says how much they weigh, and he's paid special attention to the ones that weigh 180 grams, and he asks, does the heavier record, does it matter that it's heavier, or?
Well, first of all, it's obviously lovely for us record lovers to see so many titles being released on vinyl now, both new titles from young artists and as well as old, of course, and also a lot of old titles being re-released now. So times are great. The 180 gram sort of sticker that you see on a lot of covers has become a bit of a marketing point. Yeah. 180 gram is definitely heavier than your average record, which would probably be around 120, 130 gram. But it's important not to take that particular thing out of context. What really matters in the quality of a record is the quality of the recording itself. It's the mastering, the quality of the mastering job. It's the purity of the vinyl. Is the vinyl really flat, has no warp, and is it very well centered? Meaning, is the hole exactly in the middle? All of those things have a big influence on the final sound quality. 180 gram, you could argue that the record is sort of is a bit more stable. It creates perhaps a more stable platform for when the cartridge is reading the musical information in the groove. On the other hand, you could also argue that a heavier record perhaps will store the vibrational energy for longer. Remember that the cartridge is vibrating when it's reading the musical information in the groove. It's that vibration that's turned into an electric signal. But when the cartridge is doing that, it's also sending vibration into the record, which is not a good thing.
So there's obviously both good and bad things about it.
Yeah, two sides to every story.
What I hear you say is that you can't use it as an isolated factor for deciding if it's a good record or not, a quality record.
That's exactly it. And I mean, we see that a lot in the audio industry, and everyone who's very keen to put together a very good system and people that really like, whether it's CDs or records, that there's a tendency to stare yourself blind on just one single parameter or factor or take one issue and blow it up and sort of take it out of context. And the truth is that there are so many factors that influence the final sound quality, and it really is important that you don't just focus on one little thing, but that you look at the big picture. And getting back to the weight of the record, again, there are arguments for and against, and you're the best judge of evaluating the quality of a record, and especially if you have the opportunity to compare one pressing to another.
Okay. So if we are to give Tim like an answer to this, it's more about actually bringing it home, listening to it, comparing it to another sample, or
and if you're really into your sound quality, if you have the opportunity to maybe read a review where that particular pressing is compared to another pressing that has been made at the same time or perhaps much earlier, if it's the pressing we're talking about is a re-release, then see how it's being compared to the original pressing of that same recording.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks. These days, Claus, there's a lot of remastering being done, whether it's on LPs, if it's in the digital domain. Mads Koch, he's noticed this, and he asks, is the remastered record always better than the original one?
Remastering has clearly become a bit of a marketing gimmick, and it gives record companies an opportunity to release the same musical content again and again and again, and remaster it and remaster it and remaster it. A remastering job, you cannot really say that it's better or worse. It really depends on the quality of the original mastering, as well as the quality of the job that has then been done again. Mastering is about taking the musical content that has been through the mixing process and preparing it for whatever format it's being, it's being put on. And so the mastering of an LP, I would say we've certainly seen certain technological advancements in studios and the whole process and the quality of equipment. But at the end of the day, it comes down to the skill set and the opinions and the ears of that particular engineer who's doing the mastering. You have I've certainly seen many examples where I find that the remastering is quite horrible, and I much prefer the original. And now and then I experience a remastering job where I can hear that, in my view, it's a vast improvement on the original job. So again, unfortunately, perhaps the answer is really not that clear. You have to evaluate yourself, and if you have the opportunity to compare an LP that has been remastered to the original LP, that will give you obviously a very clear answer. Do you think it sounds better or not?
Yeah, yes or no.
Yeah, yes or no. And ultimately, you have to decide whether it's a quality improvement to you or not.
And as you said, it's about the complete picture. And I guess if you like a certain engineer, the way that he masters a record, you might think that it's a better remastering. And if you don't like him, you think it's worse. So there's also an aspect of personal opinion.
Yeah, you do have, us vinyl purists and music lovers. Some of us will actually pay attention to the name of who's done the mastering. I'm almost embarrassed to say it's not something that I spend too much time on, but if you really get into comparing, especially with very old recordings, something is being re-released, who is doing that remastering? And there are certain individuals in the business that have a very, very good reputation for taking old original recordings and actually making them sound better than they've ever done. Okay. And that's a wonderful thing. But it's not the general rule.
Okay. Perfect. Heinrich Kruse, he's heard that some are against digitizing a vinyl system, but he actually still wants to have a vinyl system with a streaming possibility, so he can stream to a pair of active speakers. Is that possible?
It is possible, as long as your streaming device will accept an analog input. Then what you need to make sure of is that you have a phono preamp that will amplify the signal from the cartridge, which requires very powerful and special amplification. And you hook that up to your streaming device that accepts an analog input, and then off you go. It's perhaps a little bit unusual combining the playback of record process with streaming, but it can be done. And if that's your thing, and if that's what you want to do to get maximum enjoyment out of your music and listen to more music, then I would strongly recommend it. For us vinyl purists, we're generally against digitizing an analog signal. But what we, I guess, sometimes forget is that whether we like it or not, a lot of recordings today, or the majority of recordings today, are actually made in the digital domain, and then it's converted, and then you have an LP, and then you have the sound in the analog format. But the original recording was made in the digital domain. I think it's important not to get religious about it, but for people that are really into high quality LP playback like myself, yeah, we probably would not do it. Certainly not when we do our active listening.
Okay, but it is possible.
Yes. It is possible.
It's a phono amp, a streaming device that accepts an analog input.
Correct.
And then off you go.
Correct.
Perfect. The next question is from Mohammed Saleh, and Mohammed, he asks, why do I need a phono preamp?
Two things are unique about the signal from your cartridge. One is that the signal is very, very weak. It therefore requires extra amplification. That amplification needs to be very high quality because you want to keep the noise at an absolute minimum. The signal from a cartridge is far, far weaker than the signal from a CD player, for instance. The other unique thing is that when you make records, the signal is equalized in order to allow for long playing time and to minimize the surface noise. You actually weaken the bass notes and you boost the treble. So, roughly speaking. So, when you amplify it, you obviously need to apply it in reverse in order to get that signal that's linear. So that's the reason why you simply cannot take your turntable and hook it straight into any kind of amplifier. You need to make sure that either you have a separate phono preamp or that you have that phono amplification built into your preamplifier or integrated amplifier.
Okay. So when I've taken care of the phono stage, is it then just about plugging it directly into my passive speakers?
Yes, well, you plug the phono preamp into your preamp or your integrated amplifier. You would still need your conventional amplification because you need the volume control.
Yeah. And what if I have an active system?
Well, then it should also be possible, but here I have to say it's something that you should try out first. It depends on how powerful the signal is coming out of your phono preamp. If that in itself is powerful enough to feed your active speakers, then job done. But you would have to try it out first. Okay. But it would certainly make for a very easy system to set up and enjoy.
But with active speakers, just make sure to try out beforehand.
Yes, you need to do a little bit of investigation first and find out whether the phono preamp is sort of up for the job for feeding the active speakers directly.
Perfect. Yeah. Franz Umber, he asks, what's the difference between a belt drive and a direct drive turntable?
A turntable consists fundamentally of three parts. The deck itself, a tone arm, and a cartridge. And the whole purpose of the playback system is really to protect the cartridge and make sure that the cartridge has the best possible working conditions. Now, the deck itself, you can mount the platter directly on a motor. That would be a direct drive principle. That will give you great speed accuracy, and the platter will start up very, very quickly. But the challenge is to eliminate vibrations from the motor, and any motor will have vibrations. The challenge is to prevent those vibrations from entering the platter and then into the record itself, because you don't want to pollute the signal that the cartridge is reading in the record. You want that to only be the musical information, not vibrations coming from the external environment or the motor. The belt-driven principle, well, here you mount the platter on a bearing, and then you have the motor next to the bearing, sometimes very close, sometimes not so close, and you connect the two with a belt. Okay. Now, what that will give you is usually a much better way of eliminating vibrations from the motor entering the platter itself and then going into the record. It's a little bit more difficult to achieve the same type of speed accuracy. Okay,
so is there anywhere where you would use one instead of the other, or?
Well, direct-driven turntables you always find in the DJ environment for obvious reasons. It's very robust, and the record will start up immediately, and they can do their thing with scratching and what have you. That's simply impossible to do.
You wouldn't do that in a hi-fi setting.
No, that's impossible. Most high-performance turntables, in fact, the vast majority of high-performance turntables for hi-fi use are based on a belt-driven principle.
To eliminate all of the vibrations and give the best sound quality.
Yes.
Thank you. Claus, the next question is from Steve Waddell, and he asks if you can describe the differences between a moving magnet and a moving coil.
So, in a moving magnet cartridge, you have two magnets placed at the end of the stylus, one magnet for each channel. And as the stylus vibrates, these magnets move, and they're positioned in relation to a coil, and that is what is generating an electrical signal. Okay. In a moving coil cartridge, it's sort of the opposite. You place two coils at the end of the stylus, and they are positioned in relation to a magnet. Now,
Okay.
both the coils and the magnets, regardless of the principle, are obviously positioned inside the cartridge itself.
Does either one have any benefits or advantages compared to the other?
Well, in a moving magnet cartridge, you tend to get a more powerful electrical signal compared to a moving coil cartridge. And all things being equal, you could also argue that it's a more affordable way of making a cartridge. I'm generalizing things a bit here, but that is sort of the general principle. A moving coil cartridge, well, because the coils are lighter than magnets and the coils are sitting at the end of the stylus, you could argue that a moving coil cartridge will allow for better tracking of the record groove, and so you get all the finer details. The downside is that you have a significantly weaker electrical signal, and that requires a more powerful amplification afterwards.
So you would have to pay attention to especially your amplification stage if you go for the moving coil.
Yes, you have slightly different amplification for a moving coil compared to a moving magnet, and you need to make sure that your phono preamp has that capability. I have to say all quality phono preamps will have that capability, but nevertheless, that's something you need to look out for.
Perfect. Claus, we've come to the final question, and it's from Andy and Chuck, and they wanted to know how to match the cartridge with the tone arm.
It's a good question. The cartridge needs to match the tone arm, and the tone arm needs to match the deck. When you hook up a cartridge to a tone arm, it will always resonate at a particular frequency. What frequency is quite important. When a cartridge is in the groove, it in a way functions as a spring, because it's reading and vibrating both vertically and horizontally.
Okay.
How soft or hard that spring is, to put it in sort of layman terms, and the effective mass of the tone arm, which basically acts as a weight, that will determine the frequency where the playback system will have that resonance.
Okay.
And that is a little bit critical. And usually you would say if it falls between 9 and 14 hertz, you're sort of okay. Now, it is possible to go in and actually read that information, get the necessary data when you read the specifications of the cartridge and also the tone arm, and you can calculate exactly what that resonance frequency is. But it is an area where I would say, unless you're really experienced in these matters, I would trust a qualified dealer. And also, as with everything in audio, you also need to trust your own ears.
You said something about it has to be within a certain frequency range. What happens if it falls outside?
It creates potential problems. It doesn't necessarily create actual problems, it creates potential problems. Let me give you an example. If you have a record that's warped, now that warp in itself, that would be at a very low frequency. If then you have a cartridge tone arm combination that also resonates at a very low frequency, then it will be boosted, and that's very unfortunate. So that would affect the tracking of the record, and you want that record to be tracked the best way possible.
So it would be very audible, or?
Could be, but as I said, it will create a set of potential problems, not necessarily actual problems. And so the guideline is that if it falls between, let's say, 9 and 14, there will be general agreement that that is the best place. So, but you need to know the compliance of the cartridge, the weight of the cartridge, and the effective mass of the tone arm. Okay,
and as you said, if you're really, you want to be extremely sure, you can calculate it.
You can calculate these things yourself, and I would refer to some excellent articles that you can find on the internet if you really want to get into detail. If that seems a little bit intimidating, go to a good dealer. Trust the advice that you get from the dealer. They can help. Yeah, they can help. Perfect. Claus, that was the final question. We're done. Thank you very much for inviting me. I enjoyed that. And I have a very important message here to you, ladies and gentlemen, and boys and girls. Go out and buy some vinyl. It's a wonderful thing to own and enjoy. I'm spending far too much of my disposable income on these things. I'm not sure I would advise you to do exactly just that, but it's a wonderful way of enjoying your music.
I guess we could say that you're pretty happy that it's back in.
I am very happy that it's back in. My bank manager is not.
That's it for this time, guys. Thank you so much.